Hello, I'm Aaron Cohen. Welcome to Sanctuary. In recent years, there has been growing awareness of the need to upgrade the opportunities for serious study of modern Israel on American campuses. In the last 5 years, 4 major universities in Illinois have added courses and faculty that do just that by focusing on Israel within a variety of academic disciplines. These new offerings are the result of collaboration between the universities and the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago's Innovative Israel Studies project. To date, the effort has supported the presence of faculty at Northwestern, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, the University of Illinois at Chicago, and the University of Chicago. 3 of those faculty members are with us today to talk about what they bring to their campuses and what they, in turn, are learning from the experience. Sergio DellaPergola of Hebrew University is a visiting professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago. This fall, he's teaching a course on the Jewish people in Israel and the diaspora. Laron, also from Israel, is a postdoctoral fellow in history at Northwestern University, focusing on Israel and the Middle East. And Rachel Harris is an assistant professor of Comparative and World Literature at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She teaches Israeli literature and culture. Welcome to all of you. Israel studies has been burgeoning, and one of the first questions that I would have, and this is for you, Sergio, is what is the nature of Israel that all of these courses attempt to address? If there's one characteristic that you think that it's important to communicate, what might that be?
I think it's unquestionably the fact that Israel is by far a more complex, articulated, and normal society than we perceive usually through the media. The media, without blaming anyone, has usually a very limited time and space to cover the Middle East, and that usually goes to exceptional features like the conflict and violence. But this does not do really justice to a society that has a civil life and that has certainly developed at a very high level of culture and technology, and where people, interestingly, show a high level of satisfaction with their lives. They, of course, have many concerns economically and in terms of security. But if you look, and I am a demographer by training, I look very often at indicators like the family numbers of children. You find those are high and stable, and this points to a society that certainly is not too much concerned by what the media very often portray.
Rachel, teaching literature and culture must be an eye-opening experience for many students who, as Sergio says, are exposed to a media that tends to focus on one dimension of the Israeli reality, which is conflict. And in literature, you would expose them to a much fuller picture. What are some of the elements that you hope to communicate to students in discussing Israeli literature and culture?
Well, just as Sergio said, it's very important to convey the plurality of Israeli society and the diversity of Israeli society. And we're representing not just the conflict experience, which does appear in the literature, but also the experiences of daily life for Israelis, and not just Jewish Israelis from the mainstream white elite, but from all different forms of society, different genders, different races. And so we get to give the students the opportunity to see a microcosm of a functioning melting pot society with communal senses of ideology, of a notion of self, while at the same time seeing the diversity and the plurality within the environment.
Guy, you're in the unique position here, I guess, of having to focus on this aspect of conflict. And at the same time, as you try and expose students to a more complete understanding that they need to have in order to grasp what's going on there, do you also find yourselves teaching some elements of the Israeli reality that don't directly pertain to conflict?
In a way, because I also talk about how Israel is a very diverse society with a lot of views and a lot of opinions and many parties. And at the same time, it's a very dynamic society. The attitude of the Israeli public towards the conflict has changed a lot during the years, and I think that if anything, it became much more pragmatic.
Sergio, you mentioned that studies show Israelis to be a fairly contented group of people, which may be counterintuitive to the people coming to your course. What are some of the markers of stability, normality, contentment, if you will, that you find in Israeli?
Yeah, again, I would stress certain family patterns. I look at a figure which is quite indicative. The number of children that local-born women have. Local-born is important because Israel, as a country of immigration, has had to go through a process of adaptation and acculturation as many other immigration countries. So looking at the locally born generation, you see what the culture has produced in the longer term. And you find that during 50 years, that number of children has not changed at all. It is the highest in the West and totally stable. I don't know of any other social indicator stable, a flat line over 50 years. And we have had wars, we have had economic recessions and political upheavals. And the people, in spite of that, seems to be fairly confident that there will be a future, and this is why you bring a child to the world. I think this is just one example of something that is perhaps counterintuitive, and people don't realize that. I think it's important to explain this, and I think the opportunity, by the way, of doing this in an academic framework, as I do, is a very welcome opportunity.
Confidence in the future is a wonderful concept, and I guess survey data has a variety of ways of finding those indicators of confidence. What about in culture and in literature, Rachel?
I think the literature is much more diverse. On one hand, you get a very nihilistic, sad sort of longing for the past and wondering about what will possibly happen in the future aspect to the literature. But on the other hand, you see this incredible flourishing of the literary scene in Tel Aviv at the moment, where there are more than 30 literary journals being produced in a city of 300,000 people, which is an unheard of phenomenon. And there are manifestos and there's ideas about how we can develop the literature and questions of aesthetics that move away from politics. And those are precise indicators of the fact that Israeli society is looking towards its cultural development in a way that is outside of the framework of a political ideal.
Do you find students coming to your seminars and courses to study about Israeli literature who have background in American literature, other world literatures, or are they coming because they want to understand Israel specifically?
Oh, I think we get a huge range of students from every possible walk of life. And every person who comes into my class has a different set of experiences that they bring to the table. And one of the most delightful things about being a teacher in that kind of environment is getting the students to share those experiences and those preconceptions and using the skills that they have, but taking on the new knowledge that we offer them and letting them develop that.
And Guy, in your experience, Rachel had mentioned this concept of preconceived notions, which students are going to bring to whatever course they take. But I have to imagine that when you're dealing with the Israeli-Arab conflict, you're dealing with some preconceived notions that might be, shall we say, particularly acute. I don't know if that's the case or not.
No, I think one of the things I like about the students I meet in Northwestern is how open they are. I want to join something that Sergio said, that how important it is to do that in an academic setting, because there's so much thirst and hunger among American students to know more about Israel and get a more complex picture than you get from the coverage in the mass media. And I think in that sense, all of us fulfill a very important function for them. They want to get a bridge into that other culture, into that other world, and know more.
If I may add a comment, having had the opportunity to teach in Israel and in Western Europe, I would say the American student is the more open, to some extent is the one who comes knowing less, but open to, the American student increases and improves quickly. He's a fast learner. In Israel, you find people who are somewhat more elderly, they know it all. And so,
well, they've been there.
They've been there. and in Europe, on the other hand, you often find a group of people who are not ready to learn because they know it and they are somewhat entrenched in certain positions. So I personally like it particularly to be here because of this dialogue.
And what sort of students do you find coming to your courses? Are they generally Jewish students or?
Not at all. To some extent, to my surprise, in my class, a tiny minority of Jews, a majority, as Rachel already said, representing the vast cross-section of this large Chicago population, which is very diverse, a very interesting experience, therefore, to meet different interests, different backgrounds, very different religion backgrounds, in terms of the countries of origin, and therefore sometimes the need to explain some of the fundamentals about what Judaism is, quite beyond the topics of population and society and politics that I teach, and I think it's a very interesting learning experience on both sides.
I'd like to add to that, in fact, that what's really interesting about the kinds of students that we have is that students can wander into classes for all different reasons, partly because they're interested in the topic, but often because it fits a space in their schedule or because it fills a requirement. And in doing so, we suddenly have a captive audience who might have no interest in Israel studies and who we as professors create an interest in this area for them, and then we'll see them in repeated classes coming to us over and over. And so that in fact is one of the most interesting populations to encounter because they have no sense of what they should know or could know.
So what tends to be infectious? let's put it that way. In the courses that you teach that grabs?
Oh, I think the enthusiasm of the professor is the most infectious part. But I think that's when students find an experience or the representation of some kind of experience that ties in with something that they may be acquainted with personally and gives them an in to the area. And in literature that can be very easy. It can be representing the experience of a rite of passage or an experience towards adulthood or encountering a foreign culture, which is exactly what they're going through at the time. But it can also be engaging with a historical moment or the experiences of an ancestor. Not just a Jewish experience, but say a child who's an immigrant to the US, whose parents or grandparents have stories about the old country, and that experience of foreignness and alienation can often, or wars, all of those things, offer the students a really interesting way to begin to access it. And once you've caught their initial interest, then the students are open to all kinds of learning. And I find American students are incredibly eager to read, to learn, to participate, and they are very open, as Sergio was saying, to these new ideas and knowledge of another culture.
I'd like to join to
Sure.
this.